Thank you, Ken, and welcome. I have to say, if we have to have this class videoed, there's not a better looking bunch of faces here today, so we're happy to have you. For some of you who were expecting Tracy, our dietitian, I am covering this class for her. I've taught this class before, actually at Del Webb, just last month. So this is one of my favorite classes to teach, and it's kind of nice, actually, to teach something besides exercise. I kind of enjoy this very much. And the biggest thing is the DASH eating plan that we'll talk about today, I practice it. It's something easy to follow, and we're going to really give you a lot of information today on how to do the DASH eating plan. Notice I didn't use the word diet. There's a reason for that. To me, I try to stay away from it because diet is almost like a four-letter word. Doesn't it bring up more negative connotations, restriction, can't have this, can't have that? But the DASH is an eating plan. That means you can do it for the rest of your life. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So when I have people in my office or I talk to them about the DASH and I say, you know, have you practiced the DASH eating plan before? Do you know about it? Oh, yes, Rhonda, I use Mrs. Dash all the time. Yes, I have too. And it is a wonderful salt-free alternative. But Mrs. Dash and the DASH eating plan are two different things. So we're here to talk about the other. The DASH stands for Dietary Approach to Stop Hypertension or High Blood Pressure. So what we're going to talk about today is a little bit about high blood pressure. What is it? What are the recommendations from the American Heart Association? Where should your blood pressure fall? We'll also take a look at some monitoring tips because we encourage everyone to monitor their blood pressure on their own when they're away from their doctor's office. Then we're going to get into the nuts and the bolts, or the nuts and the seeds, maybe, of the DASH plan. We'll talk about how the research was conducted to establish this eating plan, and we're going to look at the components of the DASH plan. How much do you have? What kind of foods? Now, the handouts that you received, there's a couple of them. This is a 6-page handout right from the National Heart, Lung, Blood Institute. This has a lot of wonderful information, very comprehensive. However, if this is not enough for you, you can go online or order this book. Online, it is a 64-page PDF file, menus, recipes, all kinds of good stuff. But everything that I talked to you today about has come from the American Heart Association or this book from the National Heart, Lung, Blood Institute. All right, well, let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about blood pressure. Blood pressure is actually just the measurement of the force of the blood as it pumps through your blood vessels. We have a top number and a bottom number, and they're both measured in millimeters of mercury. The top number is called the systolic, and it is the pressure when your heart is beating. The diastolic is the bottom number, and it is that measurement when the heart is in between beats, when it is in relaxation mode. So we have the systolic over the diastolic. Now, some things about blood pressure is it can rise and fall throughout the day based on a lot of different things. It could be the amount of sleep we had or didn't have, how much we've been moving around or resting, what we had to eat or drink, and our emotions as well. We all know sometimes those times of stress, our blood pressure, we can almost feel it go up. But if it stays elevated over a long period of time, that's when it can become dangerous. It is noted as hypertension or high blood pressure when we have the top number at 140 or greater, and or the bottom number at 90 or greater. When we see those measurements over time above that perimeter, we consider blood pressure too high. Now, the thing with high blood pressure is usually there are no warning signs. Most of the time, we can walk around with high blood pressure numbers and not even know it. That's why they call it the silent killer. That's why it is important to monitor our blood pressure on a regular basis so that we know our numbers, so we can be informed. High blood pressure is very common. It has been suggested that about 1 in 3 U.S. adults have it. More than half don't have it under control. There's a lot more individuals who are in that category of pre-hypertension, which we'll see here in just a minute. It is especially common among African Americans, and they tend to develop high blood pressure at an earlier age. If we don't control our blood pressure and it stays high for a period of time, some of the things that can lead to are heart disease, kidney damage, a stroke, and even blindness. So it is so important to maintain a healthy blood pressure. So here are the recommendations from the American Heart Association on where your blood pressure should be. And I want to mention, on this American Heart Association blood pressure tracker form, you can find this chart on one of the sides. So we see that a normal blood pressure is less than 120 and less than 80. Pre-hypertension, which I really like that category because I like to think of it as a warning sign. Hey, there are things I need to do if I'm in this category to prevent it from going up. Pre-hypertension, when the systolic is 120 to 139 or 80 to 89. When we start targeting that high blood pressure, that is above 140 over 90 like we saw before. So I have a question. If I have a blood pressure of 132 over 94, do I have high blood pressure? Yes, I do. I do. Kind of a tricky question, but it has to be either or. It can be either or because my diastolic was in the 90s. So yes, I did.
Does systolic and diastolic always move, the same amount apart?
Sometimes, but not always. Not always. Now, blood pressure higher than 180 over 110 is a medical emergency, and you should call 911 right away. A stroke or a heart attack could be imminent. So some blood pressure monitoring tips. These are also listed on the blood pressure tracker from the American Heart Association. Some of the important ones I want to point out is make sure that you have a proper size cuff. An individual who has a large arm but uses a regular size cuff, it's probably not going to be accurate. Make sure that you have it fit directly over the middle of the artery. There's usually a line on the cuff where you can put it. An upper arm cuff is preferable to a wrist cuff as well. There's some other information that is in your handout, such as make sure you are sitting in a chair. You have your upper arm resting on a table right next to you. Your upper arm should be about at your heart level when you monitor your blood pressure. If you can, have the cuff on bare skin versus clothing, and remain quiet and relaxed while you have it measured. That means you're not talking to anyone and no one is talking to you. Can I have a show of hands? How many people measure their blood pressure at home or have a home unit or go to a Walgreens or CVS? Okay, fantastic. That makes me very, very happy to see that. All right, now we're going to take a look at some ways to reduce high blood pressure. And this is going to lead us right into the DASH eating plan. The first one listed is quit smoking. That can make such a big impact on our blood pressure. Lose weight if overweight. And here's the good news on that, is that even a 5 to 10% weight loss can make a big difference with blood pressure. For example, if I am a 200-pound person, my ideal weight, a healthy weight for me, would be 150. But if I just lose 10 to 20 pounds instead of that 50, I can see health-related benefits right away, including an effect on blood pressure. That's pretty exciting. Limit alcohol intake. Females, that means no more than 1 drink a day. Guys, no more than 2 drinks a day. And I always have somebody ask, well, can I just save it all up for the weekend? No. No, that's binge drinking, and that's a whole nother issue. Take medications as prescribed. Sometimes we can do everything possible to control our blood pressure, but we still need medication. That's okay. That's part of our treatment plan. We want to take it as prescribed. Participate in regular physical activity. Yes, I had to throw that in there as an exercise physiologist. When you exercise, your blood vessels have a response of opening up. When they open up, you get more blood flow in, the heart has to work less hard, and blood pressure can decrease. So regular physical activity. And following the DASH low sodium eating plan. So we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about the DASH eating plan. So taking a look at some of the research that was done for DASH, there were a couple different studies. We'll take a closer look at each one of them, but it was sponsored by the National Heart, Lung, Blood Institute. It was conducted at the 4 different medical centers that you see here on the screen. Some well-known medical centers. This was a very good, well-designed research project. So the first of the 2 DASH studies really focused on 3 different eating plans. They had individuals broken up into 3 different groups. One of them had foods, just what we call a standard or typical American diet. Standard American diet, if you take that as an acronym, it spells SAD. I noticed that the other day and I think, yeah, that's probably right. The second group had foods that were similar to the typical American diet, plus they added more fruits and vegetables into their eating plan. And then the third group followed the DASH plan. So what were the results? What they found out are the individuals who followed the plan that had increased fruits and vegetables, plus the standard American diet, as well as the DASH plan, their blood pressure went down. The DASH plan, however, had the greatest impact on lowering blood pressure. In fact, it started really quickly. They noticed the change in blood pressure within 2 weeks of starting it. So a big thing there. The important thing was the fruits and the vegetables. We'll find out more about that later. Now, the second DASH study took a look at how changing sodium levels in the eating plans, how that would impact blood pressure. So they had participants follow a 2,300 milligram of sodium per day plan, a typical American style eating plan, and what they found out that people who followed the 2,300 milligram of sodium with the DASH eating plan had very good blood pressure reduction. And if they followed a DASH eating plan with 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day, they had even more blood pressure lowering effects. So these two studies really showed the importance of fruits and vegetables and the importance of lowering sodium in their diets. Here, this gives you an idea for a 2,100 calorie eating plan that was used with some of the DASH research studies. And it gives you a breakdown of how many grams or milligrams of potassium, of sodium, calcium, all of these important minerals, as well as the breakdown of how much total fat and saturated fat was consumed with that eating plan, the protein, carbs, and the cholesterol count. So that's kind of the breakdown of that eating plan when they did the research. One thing I will point out as well, and we'll come back to it, is fiber. 30 grams of fiber a day, that's good. That's a lot. And it's ideal. We'll talk more about that. So here's the thing. As a, if you will, a side effect, the DASH eating plan was also shown to improve blood cholesterol levels, the fats in the bloodstream. As that decreased, and as their blood pressure decreased, overall they had a lower risk of developing heart disease. Because high blood pressure and abnormal cholesterol levels are two of the major risk factors for heart disease. So that impacted both of them. Following the DASH, they found as well really did help people's weight. If they moved from a typical calorie amount per day to a lower one, following the DASH guidelines that we'll take a look at, they had a positive change in their weight. And positive, I mean going down. So it was very beneficial. And that also, having a person who is in the obese category is also a major risk factor for heart disease. So again, it impacted heart-related risk as well as these others. So the DASH research, in summary, what it did was showed that high blood pressure could be prevented and lowered by following the DASH eating plan. And that, I think, is exciting, exciting news. Because if we can make lifestyle changes and avoid medication if possible, that's the way to go. Absolutely. Now, just in this past January, the DASH was in the news. It was shown to be rated by a panel of health experts as the best overall diet for the 5th consecutive year. That's good. That's really good. It was also chosen as the top diabetes diet and the best plan for just overall healthy eating. And that's really what it is. The DASH is a healthy way of eating for all of us. It just has these other benefits to go along with it, which is great. It follows the heart-healthy guidelines for eating, and it can be good for your waistline. We'll talk more about that because of that high fiber that is part of the DASH eating plan. Having a diet high in fiber can help us feel full and can help with cholesterol management, lowering blood pressure as we lower our weight. So just a lot of good things wrapped up in it. So the DASH eating plan, as we will see, is low in these components: sodium, cholesterol, saturated fat, and total fat. What it is high in is the nutrients such as the calcium, potassium, magnesium, lean kind of proteins, and fiber. These are the things, specifically the calcium, magnesium, and potassium, that we know as we have a higher intake of, it can have a beneficial effect on lowering our blood pressure. So we will take a closer look at that. The DASH eating plan emphasizes those, of course, the fruits and vegetables that were consumed in that first study. It also emphasizes fat-free or low-fat milk and milk products. And I want to clarify what low-fat is. It would be something equivalent to a 1% milk fat or lower. So 2%, the whole milk, those are the higher fat kind of dairy products. When they talk about low fat, it is the 1% or lower. The DASH eating plan also included whole grain products, fish, poultry, and nuts. The whole grain products, as they encourage that intake, can help boost up that fiber. And we'll see some more specific examples here in a few slides. The DASH eating plan is reduced in the consumption of red meats, sweets and added sugars, as well as sugar-containing beverages. And again, that is compared to that standard or typical American diet. It is reduced in these kind of food products. Let's bring up sodium for just a minute here. We know that sodium is essential. It's essential for our bodies. It can help with nerve impulses as they are sent from our central nervous system. It can have an impact on our muscle function. It is definitely a necessary nutrient for our bodies. However, the American Heart Association says that about 9 in 10 of us eat too much sodium in our daily intake. We'll take a closer look at that. Sodium is regulated in our kidneys, and it really helps control our body's fluid balance. So when we have extra sodium that we take in, and it gets into our bloodstream, it starts to pull more fluid into our bloodstream. That increases the total blood volume that our heart has to deal with. As the heart has to work harder to deal with all that extra blood volume, blood pressure can rise. Blood pressure can go up. What are some other possible effects of high sodium, excess sodium in our diet? This slide I found very interesting. It came from the American Heart Association, and it says that excess levels of sodium may put you at risk for osteoporosis, stomach cancer, kidney disease, kidney stones, and enlarged heart muscle, kind of going back to the heart having to work harder to pump all that extra blood, and headaches. Headaches. So very interesting that having too much sodium not only affects our blood pressure, it can affect a lot of different parts of our bodies as well. So lowering sodium intake. The DASH plan, as written, encourages people to consume no more than 2,300 milligrams a day of sodium. At that level, as the research has shown, it was beneficial for lowering blood pressure at the 2,300 milligrams alone. Now, that may sound like a lot, but it's really not. It's about equivalent to a teaspoon of salt per day. We'll talk more about where we get our sodium in our diet here in just a little bit. The typical American, and I've read different numbers, but takes what I have found more, the number is about 3,400 milligrams a day is what we typically take in. So quite a bit more than what is recommended. Now, if you follow the DASH eating plan at the 2,300 milligrams per day of sodium, and you're still not seeing that desired blood pressure lowering effect, you can reduce it even more. Because back in that research, that second DASH study, the individuals who consumed only 1,500 milligrams per day of sodium had the greatest blood pressure lowering effect.
Is this about added sodium or the sodium that's in the food already?
We will talk about that.
Okay.
Because yes and yes. 1,500 milligrams a day is also what the American Heart Association recommends for all of us. For all of us. Now, some experts have recommended, and I'm not talking about the American Heart Association, but other experts have recommended, instead of that 2,300 milligrams a day, that these following groups of people bring it down to 1,500. And that is people who already have high blood pressure, who are being treated for high blood pressure with medication, people who have diabetes or chronic kidney disease, African Americans, and adults over the age of 50. Wow, that pretty much includes all of us, doesn't it? So these are the groups of people that some experts recommend really bringing it down to that 1,500 milligrams per day. Where do we get our sodium? That is the question of the day. And I have a lot of people say, well, Rhonda, I don't salt anything. I don't even have the salt shaker on my table. And I say, that's great. That is wonderful. But salt comes from so many different sources. In fact, what I found from researching is about 65% of the sodium that we consume in a day comes from convenience foods, prepackaged foods, all of those things. About 25% comes from if we eat out, whether it's fast foods or restaurants, because we know the restaurants, when they're preparing our food, they want to improve the flavor, don't they? So on goes the salt. On goes the salt. It can also be used for helping to preserve color in food or the texture of some food. So sodium is widely used, but really only about 10% of the sodium we typically take in comes from the salt shaker or what naturally occurs in foods. And a couple of foods that naturally have sodium in it, and still not a whole lot, would be like celery, beets, so those kind of vegetables. But again, not very much and not enough to make a significant impact like the other ways that we get our food. So before I go to the next slide, I want to hear from you all specifically. What are some foods that you consider high in sodium? Cheese? Cheese. What else? Potato chips. Soup. Bacon. Pizza. What else?
Bread.
I can't believe somebody said that. Oh my, we will come back to that. Absolutely. Anything else? He said bread. We will talk about that. Okay. So a lot of places we get sodium from foods we take in every day. Let's take a look at that next slide there. These are just some of the foods that are highest in sodium. A lot of condiments that we take in, such as soy sauce or ketchup or barbecue sauce, pickles, olives, the lunch meats and the hams, the bacon, salami, pizzas on there, frozen meals, processed foods, seasonings that come in a little nice convenient package. Yeah, they're up there. Canned tomatoes as well. Bread. Did somebody say bread earlier? Yeah. How many of you believe that? Okay. This is such an interesting thing. In fact, bread is on the American Heart Association's Salty 6 foods, along with pizza and lunch meats. Now here's the thing. One slice of bread does not have that much sodium. So it comes down more to the quantity of bread that we typically consume in a day. So here's an example, and I actually did do some research on this, and I thought, I'm going to just pick out some foods that maybe we would have typically in a day. So a bagel for breakfast, maybe, or a couple slices of toast. A sandwich for lunch using 2 slices of bread. And maybe a dinner roll or a croissant or something with our dinner. Some kind of a roll, something like that. So when I calculated those products, I used a bagel, 2 slices of bread for a sandwich, and a roll for dinner. Any guess as to how much sodium is in just those bread products? Almost 1,000 milligrams. So if I was trying to follow that 1,500 milligrams a day, I don't have a whole lot of room for other foods. So what can we do about this? Well, we can, moderate our portion sizes. Maybe use 1 slice instead of 2 toast in the morning. Or, and we'll talk more about this, is looking at our labels. Are there lower sodium breads that are out there? There are. You've got to look at the labels and check it out. Absolutely. They don't taste very good. Oh, we're going to have to do something about that. You're so honest. You're so honest. I like it. So how can we go about lowering our sodium intake? Here are some ideas. When you're cooking, instead of adding the salt or using those pre-packaged seasoning mixes, maybe try some herbs, some fresh or dried herbs, other spices, lemon, lime, balsamic vinegar. So much flavor in those kind of products. In fact, the other day, I had run across a recipe for roasted cauliflower. So I had a head of cauliflower, cut it up into small flowerets. I had a yellow bell pepper, and I diced that up, tossed it with a little bit of olive oil, some tarragon, some rosemary, and squeezed out some lemon juice all over it. Tossed it all together, roasted in the oven, not a drop of salt added. My family, including 2 teenage boys, loved it. So I was able to use some other alternatives than that old salt shaker. When you're cooking, if a recipe does call for salt, can you cut it in half? Probably. Probably without having too much of an impact. When you're eating foods at home, going back to keeping that salt shaker off the table, if it's a temptation for you, remove it. That's a good idea. Lowering sodium intake when choosing already prepared foods. Look on the labels. Look on the cans. Are there lower sodium choices? When I looked at a couple cans of tomatoes, tomato products can be very high in sodium. And I looked at comparing some labels, and a low sodium canned diced tomatoes had about 10 milligrams per serving. Regular canned tomatoes, 150 milligrams per serving. It's amazing. It's amazing. It is out there. but you can look for those lower sodium alternatives or no salt added canned foods. Rinse off canned beans and drain before using. Has anyone ever tried that before? Very good, very good. That is a wonderful way. You're not going to get rid of all the sodium, but you're certainly going to decrease it by rinsing off the beans. And beans are a wonderful source of fiber and protein and an important part of our diet. Oh, I said the D word, darn it, our eating plan. So the other way that we want to think about is when we eat out and we sit down in a restaurant and we order our food, and we need to be assertive but kind and request that our meal be prepared without any added salt or added MSG. Now, restaurants really are there to serve you and to please you. This is not an unusual request for them, but we need to make it. I've been to restaurants before when I haven't, and I'm sitting there eating this and I'm thinking, wow, there's a lot of flavor, probably because there's a lot of salt. Or fat, butter on top, absolutely. Now, another way that we kind of alluded to is become a sodium detective. And that is all about reading the label. We will not know how many milligrams is in that frozen meal unless we look. Or in that canned soup, which is a source of high sodium. So we want to take a look at the label. The other thing we want to pay attention to is the serving size. So if let's say a can of soup has 2 servings in it, and we eat the whole can, we're going to need to double the sodium into our plan. So pay attention to the serving size as well. You want to look at the label for sodium. It's going to list milligrams. It's also going to say the percentage of daily value for sodium in one serving. That is based on about a 2,000 calorie eating plan throughout the day. So that's what the percentage is. All right, so we've talked a lot about sodium. Let's move on to focusing on the exact DASH eating plan. In the DASH handout that you have, as well as the nice 64-page PDF online, it will give you recommendations for a certain number of daily servings in the various food groups. And we're going to go through each one here. Now, the number of those daily servings are based upon an individual's calorie needs. Now, that is based upon our age, our gender, and how active we are. I'll explain a little bit more about that. So here we have a list, and this should be in your handout. We have the gender and the age, and then activity level. Is a person sedentary, moderately active, or active? How do you know? Someone who is sedentary would be really no activity beyond just doing the basic daily routine. So brushing our teeth, combing our hair, bathing, just, washing dishes, just your basic daily routine. Moderately active are those who are considered who do their daily routine activities, plus they walk about 1.5 miles to 3 miles in addition. That's moderately active. Someone who is active does all of the normal daily routine activities, plus they walk or are active equivalent to greater than 3 miles in a day. So that's how you can really find out what are your daily calorie needs. And again, broken down into gender and age and activity level. And here is a list of those serving sizes based on the food groups. On the very left-hand side on the slide, we have the food groups. We have the grains and veggies and fruits and all that. Then it has recommendations for serving sizes based on a person's calorie needs. So if I am a female over the age of 60 and I am sedentary, then I would want to follow the 1,600 calorie plan for serving sizes from each of those food groups. And you'll notice, going back to that slide, as we get older, what happens to our calorie needs? It goes down. Darn it. But yes, it does. It does. So we have a list. Now, here's the other thing that can be very helpful. If you want to follow the DASH eating plan and you are trying to lose weight, then you want to aim for a calorie level that is lower than what you typically consume. So if I typically can take in about 1,800 calories a day, and I have some pounds I want to lose, I'm going to start following the 1,600 calorie recommendations. For grains, that means about 6 servings a day. Fruits, about 4 a day. And you can see as the list goes on down. The nice thing about this list is it gives you serving size examples. So a fruit serving would be about 1 medium fruit. It could be half a cup of diced fruit or frozen fruit or canned fruit. So you have a wide variety of options there. So specifically looking at each of those food groups, let's take a look at the grains and the grain products. These food groups, or the foods that are in this group, are major sources of energy and fiber for our bodies. They can contain a lot of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is it's our body's main source of fuel. We need it. Our bodies need that carbs. And we can get it from the grain and grain products. The better choices would be to look for those whole grains or whole wheat products, whole wheat pastas, brown rice, oatmeal, barley. Any of those kind of foods would be in that group. And again, when you are shopping for breads, take a look at that label. Look for those lower sodium varieties that are out there. Unsalted popcorn, air-popped popcorn. Great whole grain snack as well. DASH vegetables. These give you, like we talked about before, they're wonderful sources of the essential minerals to bring our blood pressure down, the potassium and magnesium. Also a great source of fiber to help us with our weight management. Some of the ones that are listed there, the broccoli, tomatoes, spinach, squash, any of those can be a good choice for the DASH eating plan. And a serving size of vegetables, going back a couple slides, it's recommended to get in anywhere from 3 to 6 per day of servings based on your calorie needs. But it would be equivalent to 1 cup of salad greens, raw leafy vegetables. A half a cup of cooked vegetables would give you a serving of those vegetables. The DASH fruits. Again, an important source of those essential minerals, the potassium and magnesium. Also a good source of fiber in our eating plan. Apricots, bananas, grapes, strawberries, a lot of varieties out there that can fit into your eating plan. And then DASH dairy. We talked a little bit earlier about the low fat. Skim milk or fat-free milk is desirable. But if you have anything above that, try not to go over the 1%. And that is also with other dairy products like cheese, choosing the low-fat cheese products, low-fat yogurt as well. But those can be included in the dairy.
Rhonda, what is almond milk and where does it fall in this?
So almond milk, you again have to read the labels to find out, is it going to have enough calcium and the added vitamins A and D that regular dairy milk does? But it would be considered as part of this, but you need to really make sure you're getting in those essential nutrients as well. Soy also. And the other thing, I know some people have issues with milk sugars and they're lactose intolerant. So in that sense, you could take the lactase enzyme pills, or you can buy milk that already has that enzyme in it, the lactose-free milk, as an alternative to the regular dairy. The dash meats, poultry, and fish. These are rich sources of protein and magnesium in particular. When we think about the meats that we consume, we want to try to trim away any visible fats, remove skin from the poultry, from the chicken or turkey, and we want to prepare it in a healthy way. And that would be roasting or baking or broiling, poaching, things that don't use additional kinds of fats added to it.
Why don't they list barbecue?
Barbecue. If you grill and you don't have a lot of marinade that's just dripping with oil, that should be a good way to cook it. Yeah, it's really can be a lean way. Dash nuts, seeds, and dried beans. These are rich sources of energy. They have protein, they have carbs, they have fats, healthy fats in the nuts. They're good sources of magnesium, protein, and fiber as well. What we want to look here for is a couple things. With the nuts, they can be calorie dense. And how many of us can just stop with one handful? It's tough. But the recommendation for a serving size of nuts is about 1 to 1.5 ounces. So about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of nuts. Not a whole lot in that. Choosing the unsalted variety would, of course, keep that sodium intake down, so that's a better choice. The peanuts, the peanut butter, or other nut butters are good choices. Kidney beans, other kinds of beans, lentils, split peas. Anything in this group will have those nutrients that are listed in the top bullet. And again, use in moderation. Really measure your portion sizes. A serving of peanut butter is only about 2 tablespoons. And I think there's like 180 calories in that. And it can be easy to use more of that. So really watch the portions, follow those serving guidelines that were found on your handout. Dash fats and oils. Fat, it gets a bad name, gets a bad rap, doesn't it? But it is necessary for our bodies. It is a source of energy. It can help other nutrients work like they're supposed to, such as the fat-soluble vitamins, the vitamins A, D, E, and vitamins K. We need that fat to help those work in our bodies. We need it for our cells to function properly. But here's the thing, we want to choose the right kinds of fats, and we really need to watch how much we eat, because we have a tendency to eat too much fat in our diet.
I don't know whether to buy margarine or butter.
I'm confused.
That is probably a whole nother class. We could talk about that for sure. But we'll talk about that after class. Thank you. So the DASH study, going back to the nutrient composition, about 27% of the calories that those researchers used for those groups, 27%. But if you look back, it only had 6% as saturated fat. So it is a healthy way of eating. You get in the fat you need, but the recommendations are to keep the saturated fat low and avoid trans fats altogether. The trans fats are when they take liquid oils and put hydrogen molecules in them, become solid at room temperature. You see it a lot in baked goods, crackers, cookies, and it extends the shelf life of food products. That's why it is so prevalent. But there's a big push against that now, so keep an eye on that. Some of the examples are listed. Some of the healthier choices would be vegetable oils, such as canola oil, olive oil. Those are good sources. Low-fat mayo. Right. Now, yes, I could not leave without having a couple slides in here, again, about exercise and activity. Really, it is in part of the DASH as well, because we want to make regular physical activity a part of our lifestyle for healthy living. What the recommendations are for DASH, and really for all of us, is try to get in about 30 minutes of moderate activity on almost every day or every day of the week. A good rule of thumb or something to aim for is about 150 minutes a week. If you break that down, that's about 30 minutes, 5 days a week. The good news is that can be broken down to smaller increments, and you can still get those health-related benefits. So if you took 3 10-minute walks in a day, or 2 15-minute walks in a day, that counts. That counts towards that goal of 150 minutes a week. What the studies have shown is if your blood pressure is mildly elevated, maybe you're not on medication yet, but you know you're in that pre-hypertension stage, studies have shown that 30 minutes of brisk walking on most days of the week may be enough to keep you off of medication for blood pressure. That sounds pretty good to me. It sure does. If you take medication for high blood pressure, that 30 minutes of moderate physical activity, like brisk walking, can really help your medication work better in your body. And it can help you feel better. If you don't have high blood pressure, keeping physical activity as part of your routine can help it stay that way. Now, I will also mention that if you are taking blood pressure medication and you choose to follow the DASH eating plan, don't stop taking your medication. Okay. All right, so as we wind up here today, I am going to encourage you to start the DASH. Start it today. The benefits are it doesn't require, as we saw, any special foods, no powders or special liquids you have to buy. It can help you prevent and control high blood pressure. We've seen that it has other health benefits for our heart, such as helping with weight management and cholesterol levels. And it meets your nutritional needs. It's a healthy way of eating for all of us, for your family members. And like I mentioned very beginning, it is not just a diet. It is a way of eating for a lifetime. Ashley, I also wanted to give you a couple websites. The first one that is listed is on your handout, the National Heart Lung Blood Institute, if you wanted to look up some more information on blood pressure or the DASH, as well as the American Heart Association. Super easy to remember. It's www.heart.org. Now the sodium information, they do have /sodium if you wanted to find out more information on that.
The one at the top of that book, which the top one would go into?
The top one, yes, and in fact it may be on the back of your handout, some more information on the National Heart Lung Blood Institute. Oh, it's on the second page from the last. So this, what's that?
How to get the booklet?
Uh-huh. You can order the booklet from them, or you can get it online as well. And I'm going to turn this over to Ashley.